Today we're going to be talking about one of the most undervalued interpersonal skills, which is actively listening. Now I think a lot of people think that they're good listeners, but actually aren't. This is actually really difficult because to really actively be listening to someone, you need to do something that is hard for most humans, which is to be selfless. Active listening is an act of selflessness and unconditional giving. And as adults, if you think about most of the relationships that we have, are conditional. We are with a partner on the condition that we get some sort of value from the relationship. We stay at a company or at a job on the condition that they provide some sort of basic need. We stay friends with someone on the condition that they add some sort of value to our lives. Most of the relationships that we have are conditional ones, but if we're in a conversation and we're trying to actively listen to another person, we are just giving. But the thing is, if we want to really communicate with someone, we don't just talk at them. We want to have them follow us during the conversation. For us to have that happen, we also have to follow them along the conversation and really pay attention to what they're saying. And the better our message is received because the other person feels like we're really paying attention to what they have to say. When I was in business school, I started working as a storytelling and public speaking coach for business leaders and entrepreneurs. And I also co-taught a course on conflict resolution and difficult conversations. And when I worked with students and professionals in both of those realms, I really witnessed how difficult it was for people to actively listen. It is a really difficult skill for someone to put themselves aside and put what is being said by someone else on center stage and give that their full attention. So what I learned about how to get people to snap out of themselves and really dive deep into what's being said by another person are a few things. One of those things is when someone is speaking, you have to put the words that they're saying in the context of their current life situation. So what I mean by this is you can hear words being said, and hearing those words is one thing, but fully understanding them and reading between the lines requires that you put those words in the context of everything else that is going on with that person. So one example that I have is I was out to dinner with friends, and one of my friends I know was just recently laid off from a job. So we were all wrapping up dinner, and one of my other friends suggests, hey, let's go to this bar afterwards. I really want to check out this bar. And everybody starts agreeing and says, oh, I wanted to check out that bar too. My friend who was just recently laid off said, oh, actually, I need to head out early tonight. I don't think I'm going to make it. And they said it in a really lighthearted way where it was sort of glossed over and folks were like, oh, okay, I guess you need to head out early. But if you apply the context of this person's life, they just recently lost a job, there's probably a lot of emotional things and psychological things that are plaguing them right now. After they said that, I jumped in and I said, hey, actually, I don't think that I want to go to the bar. I don't really feel like drinking, but what if we just walk dinner off right now? And then usually in a group setting, people don't really care what you do. They just need a thing to do if they want to keep hanging out. So even people who are excited about the bar said, oh, we can go for a walk too. That's cool. So we ended up just walking after dinner instead of spending time at the bar. And the friend who initially said that they needed to leave actually hung out with us for the rest of the night. It turns out that they actually had the time to hang out and didn't have to head home early. It's a simple example, but if you apply a little bit of emotional intelligence and context to what that person was saying, at face value, they seemed happy and unbothered by needing to go home because they made that statement in a really lighthearted way. But if you take those words in the context of their life and what's going on around them and their personality, this person tended not to complain or draw attention to their own problems. So I knew that they weren't going to say, oh, I can't go to the bar because I'm really worried about just being laid off and not having any money. Being someone who's able to pick up on those things and even sort of like take a hit by putting yourself in the position that is the initiator for a different idea. So in that example, even though I was fine with going to the bar, I said, actually, I don't want to go to the bar. I want to go for a walk. Being someone who assists with something that someone else wants also is a form of active listening mixed with emotional intelligence. So if you are hearing someone say something and you know that there is something else going on with them in their life, or that their personality is a certain way, take those words in the context of those two things, and that will help make someone else feel like they're being understood by you, that you're really listening and paying attention to them. Another thing that's important is to show sincere interest in someone who is speaking. Now, this can sometimes be difficult because as humans, we naturally have different biases. There are going to be some people that we're going to have an easier time expressing genuine interests about, either because we share the same identities, or we have things in common, or we have a past history with them. Those are the people where sincere interest just sort of happens organically because we've already developed some sort of fondness for them. Where it can be difficult is when there's someone that we have less in common with, or that we know less about them, and so it's harder for us to develop this sincere interest. And in these situations, what I like to do is, if you can't find a common ground with someone, find a common spot. And this is an idea that I talk about in another one of my videos, How to Talk to Anyone. And what I mean by this is, even if you don't have a large set of overlapping common interests with someone, there's got to be something, one small thing that you have in common, because humans have a universal set of feelings that everybody feels, no matter who you are. They're just triggered and initiated for different reasons. But if you find that you have at least a small thing in common with someone, start growing from there and develop a sincere interest in that. Tied into sincere interest is asking really good questions. So this can be clarity questions. So if you don't know about something that someone mentioned, you can ask them to clarify what that was. Or if they mention something interesting, you can ask them to go into more detail. So asking questions helps someone else feel like you are really engaged in the topic that they're introducing in that moment. You're not just letting them run off and speak about something without any feedback, because if you ask a question, it's a form of engaged feedback. It's you expressing, I really like what you're talking about. I want to learn more, but I need some more information and detail. Let me ask a few questions so that I can get you to talk more about this. And the more you ask questions and the more you get the other person to talk about it, the more that they feel like you're interested in them, and the more that they feel like you're actively listening to them. Another skill that can be difficult for some people, and for some reason other folks find this fairly easy to do, is connecting the dots in the conversation, or even from conversations prior. So if this is your first conversation with someone and you want to show them that you're actively listening to them, you'll start to notice that from the beginning of when you start talking to the end of the conversation, or your current moment in the conversation, there are going to be trending topics or themes or phrases or subjects that they tend to repeat throughout the conversation, whether they're constantly mentioning their kids or their partner or what they did over the weekend. There's going to be something at the top of their mind that's going to naturally come into the conversation. And that's because we're all humans and we tend to have things that are top of mind for us. And if we really want to express that, they just come out in different ways no matter who we're talking to. So if you find yourself in a conversation and you find that someone has mentioned their toddler 3 times throughout the span of 15 minutes, then you can say something like, hey, I realize that you mentioned that your kid really likes dinosaurs and that you went to this museum last weekend. Have you checked out this museum? Is this something that you would be interested in? And that can do a lot for making someone feel heard, because it shows them that not only were you paying attention at the start of the conversation and holding the same attention now, but you were able to take 2 different ideas, taking a trip to a museum and a child's interest in dinosaurs, and tie them together to recommend something new or to ask another question and to follow up. And that can mean a lot to people because it makes them feel like there was never a part in the span of the time that you were talking where they lost you as an audience. And that can make people feel really connected to you and really seen and heard. Another thing that is really important is to not interrupt. And what I mean by interrupt is if you start speaking when someone else is speaking with the intention of trying to get your point across before they get their point across. Sometimes there are people who are just really excited in a conversation and they don't want to lose a thought if someone mentions something that triggers an idea in their head and they just want to get it out there. I think that is okay because it's a form of engagement, and if it takes 2 seconds to jump in with a comment, then that's great. But if you jump in with the intention of taking over the conversation as someone else is speaking before they've even finished their point, then that's something that we have to hold back on, because that makes the other person feel like they've been cut off, that we're less interested in what they have to say and more interested in what we have to share. And that really takes away from the connectivity within the conversation. So I really want to make a distinction between interrupting, which is the intent to overpower someone as they're speaking, and speaking while someone is speaking, which is more additive and adding more color and contributing to the conversation, and then quickly stepping back and then giving them the floor again. So those are things that I think are really helpful. And I think you'll find that if you apply any of these tips to your future conversations, you'll feel a lot more connected to the other person. They'll feel more connected to you. And ultimately, you'll have a lot more fulfillment from the interaction. I can't tell you the number of times that opportunities have come to me, not because of anything significant that I accomplished or crazy that I did, but because someone said, I really like talking to you, or I like having you around, or you ask really good questions, or you make me feel like I'm the only person in the room. Making someone feel special just by listening to them is a really underrated skill that I think if more people practiced would result in a lot more connection with other people. So that's all for today. I hope that this video was helpful. If you liked it, please like or subscribe. Until next time, see y'all. Take care.